I've been a founder for the past 8 years. So the best way I could profile myself is like, I'm good at getting stuff done. This would have probably happened in any organization. We were talking through like new plans that we were considering, and then people were getting really nervous. What if it doesn't work? I was like, what if it doesn't?
How important do you think it is for a product leader to have a commercial mindset? And how important is it for a commercial leader to have a product-led mindset? And which is more important?
The positioning has been wrong for salespeople to really get on board. It's been quite competitive. Yeah. The PLG versus sales kind of thing, right? It's like, no, we're better. No, we're better. It's like, no, you want both.
How long did it take from the moment that you started writing the book until it went published?
Product management has changed. It's not anymore. In the beginning, it was really that CEO kind of role, and it's not anymore. And that is definitely a problem. Having a mediocre thing is so much worse than not having anything at all. And that's like with things, with data, with people, it's always the same.
All right, welcome to the latest episode of our Grow with the Flow podcast. And today we have Vincent Jong. Vincent, thank you very much for joining us.
Hey guys, great to be here.
So for those of you who are maybe less familiar with Vincent, he is the CPO of Dealfront. He's also a founder of a boutique software development agency, development service provider called Connected Product, and the author of the renowned book, Product-Led-Sales, very relevant topic today. He was previously founder of a company called FunnelFox. He also was a product leader at the company ZoomInfo, and generally is one of the, I think, more prominent voices in Europe when talking about that alignment, that sensitive area between product and commercial. So, Vincent, thank you a lot for joining us. And let's start with our usual question, which is, what is your origin story? How did you get here?
The origin story, I mean, how far should I go back, right? Let's start with some of the first jobs that I had as I was getting into studying, because already then I got into go-to-market, right? So I was a sales rep for 2.5 years during my bachelor's. And so for 2.5 years, I was doing telesales with like high target pressure. If you didn't deliver for 2 months in a row, you'd be out, and like spent 2.5 years there learning the basics, right? Learning about how to follow up, learning about when they say no, just say next, kind of that kind of stuff, right? And so that was my first experience with sales and with B2B as well. From there, I had always a bit of a dual path. So I had like a career role, which I had a job at Deloitte next to my studies, but I was also already starting my own company. So I had a recruitment agency where we brought graduates together with companies, and both of those were kind of going in parallel. Eventually, at the end of the study, I knew I needed to make a choice, and I decided to join a startup of someone in Vienna, which is where I was based at the time. And that was like a seasoned entrepreneur who'd already sold a business. So I thought it's a good place to learn. And there I ran business development for 3 years. So it was like a company, small company, 5 people. When I joined, we had 50,000 users. When I left, we had 50 million users. So that whole journey, expanding from 4 countries to 32 countries, and being part of how we built the offering and the go-to-market was really, really interesting. And after 3 years, I kind of like hit a ceiling there for my own development, and I decided it was time to start my own company. I felt like, okay, I'm ready now to do my own company full time. And so that's how FunnelFox was born. And I wanted to solve one of those problems that I kept running into myself as a sales rep. And remember that at that time, this is going to make me seem old, but at that time you did manual follow-ups, right? So you had a spreadsheet where you had all your companies that you were in touch with, and you would mark the last time you sent them an email, and then you would go back to your spreadsheet every week and look at who you'd still need to follow up with, and then look that up in your mailbox. So I came up with like an initial product that I thought I could build myself, which is kind of like what Gmail does nowadays. It didn't exist at the time, where they said, "Hey, you sent this email 3 days ago, 5 days ago. Do you want to follow up?" Right. So that's kind of what we built, literally into Gmail, and that was like the first feature. It wasn't even a full product, but a feature that FunnelFox was, and that's how I started to learn how to bring something to market yourself, how to develop product, and so on. So the beginning of a long journey was 8 years in the end. And so for 8 years, really built that into what became something that had a much bigger potential than that initial feature, really helping sales reps already at that time figure out which companies should I talk with in my pipeline. who are the right people? What should I say to them? What happened in the news? Are they hiring anything? So a lot around what you hear today about signals and so on. And we were doing that then, and it was too early, unfortunately. So after 8 years, the company didn't survive any longer. But it was a lot of the topics that are hot today.
Yeah.
Were the things we were already looking at then. In the meantime, of course, the sales lofts and the outreaches of the world entered the space, so no one was doing follow-ups through their Excel sheet anymore nowadays. And yeah, eventually I moved on and I joined ZoomInfo. This was a funny moment because it was like the final days of FunnelFox, and it was, like it was already clear where it was going, and then I started to consult a company called Ringlead, New York-based, also go-to-market data company, data management especially. And so they were being acquired by ZoomInfo, and they wanted a product leader for that entire unit. And this was at a time where I was thinking like, okay, I've been a founder for the past 8 years. So the best way I could profile myself is like, I'm good at getting stuff done, right? That's my skill. And it's like, that is not a profession, unfortunately, right? So I really struggled with thinking of what is my next place, because I didn't just want to jump into the next company and go on another fundraising tour and so on. And so when they said, hey, we think you'd be a good fit, do you want to do this? I was like, okay, yes. If you think I can do it, then I'm willing to give it a try. And of course, I'd done some product-like work for them already. Yeah. So that worked out really well, actually, in the end. And I spent, the next 1.5 years there working on bringing together, so integrating the solution into the platform with the teams, the product, and so on. And that was a great experience. Really loved working there. The biggest challenge, though, was that it was a US-based company, and I was at that time already based in Barcelona, right? So I was flying back and forth all the time. Every time you fly, you lose 2 weekends. You're tired from jet lag, and that just didn't work for the life that I wanted to live. So eventually, I left because of that, and only a few weeks later, I run into Pekka, who is one of the founders of Leadfeeder, which is now one of the companies that we created Dealfront out of. I told him about the changes in my situation, and he said, well, actually, we have a big announcement coming up ourselves, because we had almost partnered with Leadfeeder when I was running FunnelFox. So he said, let's talk next week. I'll send you the announcement on Tuesday. And turns out that was the merger announcement, which eventually created Dealfront. And he said, well, we're looking for someone to run product. And, my background made a lot of sense in terms of what also the things that were going to be done for that merger. And that's how I ended up there. So that's been the last 2.5 years, and it's been really, really exciting. I knew I was signing up for a roller coaster, but that's also, all the other jobs kind of seemed a bit boring. And I think I got what I asked for in that sense. So
part of the game, huh?
Yeah, it's really. Can you bring us back to like that moment where you're a founder, you're reaching kind of the end of that chapter with your own company. You have this new chapter kind of opening where you're moving basically from being a founder to being an executive.
Mm-hmm.
What was the reasoning behind wanting to do that? You talked a bit about, you wanted to kind of craft that profile a little bit, but what was the thought process? What was the challenge? How did that feel? Because I can imagine I moved from executive to founder, and that's a really tough transition as well. But if I were to transition back into being an executive, I think there'd be some things I would struggle with. What were the benefits and the downsides, and how did you experience that transition?
So a few things. So first of all, the biggest thing at that moment in time, which I also know from a lot of other founders, is I needed a place to normalize. I needed to just not be responsible for everything. I was a single founder CEO for 8 years. Yeah, and I just didn't want the burden of everything on me. So it was funny because I joined ZoomInfo, and this would have probably happened in any organization. And we were talking through like new plans that we were considering. And then people were getting really nervous. What if it doesn't work? I was like, what if it doesn't? Will everyone lose their jobs? No. All right. Good. That's what it used to be like. So in that case,
the stakes are lower.
Yeah, exactly. The stakes are lower. And it's just a whole different level of tension and that made made me much more comfortable about making certain decisions where other people that were kind of on the corporate ladder since the beginning, they would struggle with that. So that's one part. I think also what I noticed is, of course, when I was running FunnelFox, we were a much smaller company than ZoomInfo, which was about 3,000-4,000 people at that time. And I realized that in this bigger context, when you have bigger levers to pull, my skill set was a lot more valuable if applied the right way. Because if I could get something to move, suddenly you're moving millions, right? Instead of trying to find product market fit.
Yeah.
And so that was also a really interesting finding, and something where I saw like, oh, wow, there is a place for me here. I was lucky to some extent that I spent these years at Deloitte, because when I was there, the senior manager that I worked for, he spent a lot of time literally teaching me about politics in companies. And he sent me out to arrange things with other senior leaders, whereas I was like not even a graduate at the time. And I was running reorganizations in the company. And so I learned a lot from that of like, okay, what are the tricks? What are the playbooks that people like, there's all these little things, and you start to recognize them later. Yeah. And then when you're in a big company again, suddenly I was seeing it everywhere, right? And that's that was really helpful, because else it can be hard to navigate if you just come in there with a founder mindset.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting transition, and you see it a lot that former founders make really good executives a lot of the time. The risk is only that, one day they might want to go do their own thing again. But they just come from a much higher stakes environment, much higher pressure. And I also recognize that the different kind of approach to risk, being willing to make certain decisions, you can suddenly make decisions that you weren't maybe able to make before. So that's one interesting kind of dichotomy in your journey. The other one is this kind of sales versus product leader. So you went from a salesperson to a founder to a product leader of companies that sell software to largely sales or commercial teams. That's an unusual combination. And I think it taps into something that I see a lot of friction in a lot of organizations between our sales or commercial teams and product teams. So maybe the first question would be, how important do you think it is for a product leader to have a commercial mindset? And how important is it for a commercial leader to have a product-led mindset? And which is more important?
I think it's very important for product people to have a commercial mindset. And I think also tying to it, the previous part, right? If you understand how a business works and not just how product works, you make very different decisions and different considerations. So I've actually even released some content around this as well, that, it's a huge lever for also career progression for people in product, because this used to be table stakes. It used to be that product people had like almost that CEO view of their part of the business. But nowadays, it got like kind of compartmentalized a lot more, and different responsibilities were handed over to other teams. And so that view has gone lost a little bit. But I think there's a huge opportunity for anyone in product, and that it definitely more and more will become important as companies are adopting product-led techniques everywhere. The other way around also, I think, you don't have to suddenly become a product-led company or product-led sales leader, but it's similar as to like, it's just another tool in your go-to-market toolkit. If you're not looking at this, it's like not looking at partnerships at all, or not looking at ads at all. There's a place usually for this if you're selling software. But you need to understand where it can bring value, and where you need to bring your product people in, basically, to get efficiencies or whatever it is that you need to get to improve your go-to-market motion. So, yeah, I think also the positioning has been wrong for salespeople to really get on board. It's been quite competitive, the PLG versus sales kind of thing, right? It's like, no, we're better. No, we're better. It's like, no, you want both, right?
It's not binary.
That's right. No. That's right. It's not either or. And once people start understanding that better, then I think it also becomes more logical to get more understanding of the other side.
Yeah, absolutely. What would you say is, because you've obviously seen a fair few organizations, and as a person who sits between that kind of commercial and product, experience, what sets apart the companies where product and sales are well aligned? And when I say sales, we could maybe even expand commercially to include maybe marketing in there, and then other kind of revenue related teams. But what do the organizations where product and commercial are well aligned, what do they have in common? Like, what sets apart the companies that do this well versus the companies where it's, sales blames product blames sales, and they hate each other, which I guess is, I mean, from my experience, a majority of companies have some issues around that.
Yeah. The main thing I always emphasize around this, and we really saw this with the merger at Dealfront, right? So we were bringing together Leadfeeder, which was product-led, and EchoBot, which was traditional sales. Now, we could really see how the two were different, but we wanted to combine them into one company, which we've done by now, right? And we could really see that even though both companies were, of course, tracking product usage, right? You're selling software, of course, you know who's using your software, how often they're logging in, and so on. But the difference was that with Leadfeeder, these metrics were part of the go-to-market conversation. So we have sold this many deals, how many of them have activated, how many of them are using it after 3 months, and so on. And on the traditional sales side, this wasn't the case. Like another team looked at that, right? And so that's I think the starting point of having the right conversation, like the awareness and the visibility of these metrics in the go-to-market conversation. And from there, all the right questions will start to be asked, right?
Yeah. And what would you say are kind of like the main blockers to this happening? You say this conversation is really important, right? You need the sales teams and you need the product teams. They need to work together. They need to be well aligned. And we see the same with marketing and product. We see the same with marketing and sales. What are kind of the main blockers, and what can a founder do? Because you have that founder perspective. What can a founder do to overcome those blockers? Because of course, part of it is, these teams need to be willing to collaborate, and they, you need to hire people who are open-minded enough to work together, and they see that, they share the same goals and they share similar challenges. But beyond that, what can a founder do to facilitate that? And what are these kind of blockers that they need to overcome?
So I think one of the things to get clear on is that doing product-led growth or product-led sales even is not a business goal, right? It's a means to an end.
Yeah.
And there's many different ways that you can apply it. So you can apply it at the product-led tactics at the beginning of your customer journey, in the middle, at the end. You can use it to to find customers, to convert them, to qualify them, to retain them. And so the first question is, what are you trying to do, right? And if you're already doing something else, like sales today, then where you want to look at, like, what are your top 3 challenges of getting more out of your existing pipeline? And that's where you then focus your efforts. Then you say, okay, so how can the product help me do this? Hey, I'm getting bad quality leads in. Okay, how can the product help me better segment them beforehand so I get the right ones in? How can I need higher ACV for my sales reps. Okay, so how can I identify the ones that have a better fit for higher contracts and maybe automate the other ones? And so that's the way to look at it. Yeah. Instead of the other thing that I do see a lot is like, okay, let's do PLG. We're selling 50K contracts today, but let's add a freemium that's going to get all the SMB ones in because they're coming to our website so we can capture them, right? Now, unless you're deliberately going down market, this doesn't help anybody, right? This is just a lot of noise. And most companies are not deliberately going down market at the moment, right? So this is a very common scenario that someone suggests that because they're still thinking of PLG as this thing that only happens at the beginning of the funnel, like a Calendly or a Typeform, like kind of way. Yeah. And that's the biggest limitation then. Yeah,
it's also, we had Wes Bush on a few weeks ago, and
he's great.
He's great. And one of the things I really liked about that conversation is that people tend to confuse, product-led growth as a GTM motion, as a strategy, and the tactics that are often associated with PLG, right? We'll put a free trial and a product tour, and we'll just call ourselves a PLG company. That's kind of the most common. And as you say, or we'll add a freemium. So I really like what you say, that it's not like this binary thing. It's not that you're either PLG or sales-led. I mean, of course, there are companies that are entirely product-led and don't have any sales motion. There are companies that are entirely sales-led. But I like what you said with, it's like tools in the toolbox. Yeah. So that's an important one, because I think a lot of companies feel like they have to make this kind of radical shift. And we talked about this with Wes, that you see some companies, like the founder says, PLG, that's going to be the new silver bullet. And then you launch a free trial, and the first version of your free trial is never going to be it's never going to nail it. because there's all kinds of factors around sign up and onboarding and all kinds of things you need to figure out. And then they launch it, and it doesn't change the whole business, because why would it? And then they abandon the whole concept of product led within a week.
It's like when you think a new hire is going to solve all your problems, right? Or like it's just not how it works. You need to have some idea of the solution already, and if you know, for example, what the specific problem is that you're trying to solve, then you can start testing in that direction. And if you say, well, we think we have people visiting our website that would not want to book a demo, but they would want to sign up by themselves. Okay, good. So let's start by putting an interactive demo on the website. That's like the lowest effort version of getting some first PLG sense, right? Okay, do people use it? Yeah, they click through to the end. Great. Do they then book a demo? Or is it more of them? Or are they better qualified? And if that's the case, then you can maybe start letting them in. So that's your next step. But you're not changing your pricing model yet. You're first trying to see if they're coming in, because the pricing model you want to change last, right? Like that's the hardest thing to come back from if it doesn't work out.
Yeah.
So it's like taking those little steps on the journey instead of just going all in on like a 6-12 month project and then
just testing things.
That's right.
Yeah, it's so important to test things. We see it as well with the pricing. But it's an easy instinct. With my previous company, I also thought, we have to change the pricing. But the first thing I thought about is, okay, so we have to choose what the plans are going to be. We have to decide what the dollar amounts are going to be for each plan, and we have to choose which features are included. Then we have to code that into the platform. And then we said, you know what? Let's forget about all the development work. Let's just test it in some calls.
Yeah.
Let's just say, look, this is the pricing. Once you hit this limit, you're going to have to upgrade.
Yeah.
And we said, and we'll just handle it by just CS emails the customer when they've hit a limit. We look in the back end, we say, okay, you've passed the limit for this plan, you need to move on to the next plan. And when we did that, I felt so stupid for thinking, we have to revamp the entire pricing and how it's implemented, because that's one of the big blockers, right, is implementing the feature discrimination, the feature upgrades, the feature limits. But you can very often test that through sales.
Absolutely.
Which was kind of our first experience of using the sales team to validate something that would be maybe more from the PLG side.
Yeah.
That was a really interesting experience.
And even if you cannot control all of it right away, people are still buying it with that expectation. If you say, you only get 10,000 credits, but you cannot enforce it yet, they don't know, right? So they're buying, and that's what you're trying to measure. They're buying that thing for 10,000 credits for that price. Then they spend 20,000, and they you didn't do anything. They're just going to be more happy, right? So there's no loss there, and you're learning what you need to learn, and that's what it's all about, the learning curve.
Yeah. Do you expect sales teams to also be in the product data? Or is it more that the product teams need to be sharing that data with the sales teams?
I think the product people should be in the sales data. Actually, option 3.
Yeah, good. That makes sense.
Yeah, because it's hard to think like a product manager if you're in sales. It's harder to make that shift than the other way around, I would say. There's so much you would need to understand in terms of what is even technically possible, how do things work today, what's the scope or like effort for certain things. So, I mean, ideas that come from sales and from CS are great, but it's easier for a product person to understand what does our customer journey look like, where are we struggling, what is the problem there? Okay, so what can I come up with that could maybe help there? Right? That's the much easier way to get to good ideas.
Yeah. We had Leah Taran on a few weeks ago.
Oh, nice.
Also still to be released. That was a PLG heavy week. And Leah, and one of the things she said is she's a big believer in shared goals for these teams, which is quite controversial often within organizations to say, product and sales both have some stake in revenue or some responsibility for revenue. Her argument being that it encourages people to reach over the aisle and actually reach out and actually collaborate. The flip side being, of course, people are going to complain that they have goals they can't fully control. How do you manage that? How do you currently do that at Dealfront? Who owns what responsibility does the product team have in commercial metrics and vice versa? Well, vice versa, probably less so, as you said, but.
So our product team doesn't have revenue goals, but we also have a growth team, for example, that is responsible more for like conversion metrics. So they might not have a number, but they have a metric that impacts that number directly, right? So sign up conversion, onboarding steps, those kind of things that we know impact activation or retention and so on.
Are these product people or marketing people?
Our growth team is under marketing, but a lot of the stuff that they do requires product, so we work together with them. It's growth is often a multifunctional team. We don't have it as a multifunctional team, but basically a unit of people that work together. So it looks a bit different in every organization. I don't think we have the most mature setup of what a growth team can look like, but this is what's working for us right now. And so having them own the conversion metrics, which then impact the revenue metrics that the sales team is responsible for. But by them owning the conversion metrics, they also can own self-serve more, which is something that is hard for sales to own, in my opinion. Like that's because it kind of competes a little bit. So that's how we've done it so far.
Yeah. And what is your view on, because you're talking about growth people being on the marketing side, and that's something I experience a fair bit. I think that's kind of the US-Europe divide, right? Growth teams in the US are more often within the product department, and in Europe that function evolved a lot more on the marketing side, which is just an interesting kind of discrepancy. One of the things I'm curious what you think about is, this is maybe not massive news for product people, but a lot of people listen to this are GTM leaders and founders and marketers, that, Airbnb, for example, got rid of the product management function. There was a lot of talk about, they said, we don't have product managers anymore. Product managers is a thing of the past. And now we have kind of like these product marketing type all-rounders, which really brings kind of like almost this marketing, growth, and product combined into one. As somebody who has that kind of commercial founder and product kind of like DNA, what do you think about that? Let's say the labels aside.
Someone still's got to do the work, right? So no matter what we call it, like the work still needs to be done. Someone will own the role. I have to admit, I know that Brian said these things, but I've only read the headlines. I didn't get hooked on the thing. Maybe I should have, but generally, like based on what you just said, you can structure an organization whichever way makes sense. But I do feel that product role, the specification, well, first of all, the roadmap of what is there to build, the specification of that, making it easy to understand for the engineering teams what they then need to do so that they can work efficiently towards delivering that. All that stuff, you cannot just get rid of that. But where I expect that this point comes from is tying a little bit to what I said in the beginning, right? Product management has changed. It's not anymore. In the beginning, it was really that CEO kind of role, and it's not anymore. And that is definitely a problem, right? And I think if this suggestion is a response to that, then there's probably something in there. And I haven't fully figured out also how to change the structure around that. But I do assess people around this, and I try to push them in that direction of like, hey, have you looked at this and think about what's happening on the go-to-market side? And
that makes a lot of sense. I mean, I just see now that one of the issues is, of course, you have salespeople, and you have customer success people, and you have sales engineers, and then you have product managers, you have product owners, you have project managers, you have growth people, you have marketing people, you have product marketers. So I guess some of the desire to merge that into more comprehensive roles comes from you start getting to a point where people on the product side and people on the growth side and people on the marketing side, some of them are doing some pretty similar stuff. Yeah. And then and they're in some organizations running straight past each other, like ships in the night.
For sure. And this is a problem. And this is also what I see why people are when product managers are less thinking about the go-to-market is because, part of that is now owned by the growth team that's doing the onboarding and activation kind of stuff. Then the product marketing team is doing the further rollout and the positioning and whatnot. So the role got a lot smaller in the end. And I do think that if you look though at companies that are sales-led today, so growth is a function that is more common in product-led companies, right? So if you look at sales-led companies, they actually don't have a growth team. And they're likely not gonna have a growth team anytime soon. So this does come down to the product manager in that case. And I've been contemplating because it's not growth what they'd be doing in that case, but is it somehow like a go-to-market PM? Is that a thing? Like that someone that actually works for the sales process,
like a product marketer kind of.
So but their customer is the sales team, right? Like, does that have a title? Or is it just the PM's responsibility? I don't have the answer to it yet, but as long as no one else owns it, product owns it, right? So owns it in terms of is responsible for making that work.
Yeah.
Okay. I think conscious of time, I have a question around your book, right? So you wrote Product-led Sales. Can you tell us a bit more about the process to write the book and the reason why you wrote the book?
Yeah, so I'm someone who does or learns by doing. and I had we had a lot of learnings from bringing the two companies together to form Dealfront, and a lot of that was around product-led growth. When I was running FunnelFox, we were doing product-led sales as well. So we had like a trial and a sales team behind that, and a lot of it again around qualification and things like that, and reaching out to the right customers. And as I was like getting more and more involved in that space or more interested, I realized we were talking about things as if they were new, whereas this was like well over a decade being done by a lot of companies already, right? So at Leadfeeder, we had like over 12 years of data of all kinds of things. And at the same time, product-led sales as a term only existed for 1.5 years at that point in time. And I remember people saying, oh, we haven't even really tried outbound with PLG yet. So yeah, we have. I can show you the data, right? And it works. We do it. We still do it. So so I felt like there was something to share on the one end. So that was one part of it. And on the other side, I had, I guess you could say, creative energy that needed to go somewhere. That's maybe still the founder in me a bit. Like if you're in a big company, like you're moving slower, right? And that's okay, that's normal, but you're moving much bigger volumes. So therefore the dimensions are different. But sometimes it's also nice to just sit down and do something, right? And I think that's kind of, I needed somewhere to put that energy. And that's how I started to write the book. And I figured, well, I'll just start writing something and I'll see. At first I looked up, okay, what's the minimum amount of words? Okay, 25,000, I can do that. So I just started to write, and then at some point I got to 25,000. I was like, it's not finished, right? So that's how I ended up getting to 40,000, even 60,000. Like, now it's too long. And then so it was like a whole process, and then learning what all the steps are, right? You need to have a certain editor, and I ended up having 2 different ones, and design, outer design, inner design, those are apparently different people. And then publishing, what to do when you bring it to market and how to approach that. So it turned out there's all these specialisms around it. So it was just an interesting journey, something different to learn. And I also decided it was kind of like a muscle I wanted to develop. I had thousands of LinkedIn contacts, but I'd never posted or barely ever, right? So I'd never put myself out there and say, this is my point of view. And it was time to start doing that and kind of develop.
Oh, super good. So how long did it take from the moment that you started writing the book until it went published? Just quickly for us to have an idea. I
thought it would be 6 months, but it ended up being well over a year.
Yeah.
I started writing it. Well, the big chunk of the first writing I did on our way to our honeymoon. We were flying to Australia. I thought that's great. 24 hours on the plane, right? So that's a great time.
And then you wrote 60% of it.
I did not. So no, but I made good progress. And also there we had a number of flights on that trip. So during that trip I wrote a lot. And then once I was getting towards that was around April, and then towards the end of the year, I really felt like, okay, I got to push now. I got to get to a point where this is first draft and kind of I can start getting feedback. And that's, so I spent first day of Christmas writing. 1st of January, 9 a.m. I was behind my laptop. It was really like, I just wanted to get this thing out. So yeah, but the thing is, once I commit to something, I do it. So that was, that's what helped me get through this.
Nice. Super
cool. I have a good friend of mine, a guy called Byron Ben-Barra, together with Philip Jordanov. They published a book on behavioral change, basically, behavioral psychology and business and organizational change. Shout out. And he also said, the first kind of 80% went pretty swiftly, and then that last 20% just took forever.
Yeah.
So I can imagine that it's one of those things where, you need to get all these ideas out, and you need to get the content out, but then you need to format it and you need to edit it, and then maybe you have new ideas and I guess
structure and readability, those were the 2 things that really, but they were so worth the time that I spent on it. So at some point I completely redivided the chapter structure, because I had written it in a way that my mind processes this, knowing like, okay, there's these 7 different things and so on. It's like, no, what are the 3 things people are trying to do? And let's organize it like that, right? And like, instead of writing sentences the way I learned at university, which are long sentences with connecting words and so on, they need to be short so that you can easily, like when you stop, you look up and you look back, you can just continue. You don't have to like go back, and the cognitive load is lower. And so those were all new concepts to me that I never thought about. which also made it really interesting.
Yeah.
Nice.
I'm curious about because you work in this as the CPO at Dealfront. You also have your own kind of boutique software development kind of venture on the side. How do you balance those? How do you balance Vincent the founder and Vincent the executive?
Yeah. Well, my Dealfront role is what I do during, like, it's my day job, if you will. And at night, no, I actually
You put on the cape.
That's right.
I said Barcelona.
No, so I founded Connected Product, but the work there is being done by the teams that do that. So it's an efficient structure that that it ends up being like a few calls a month for me just to stay in the loop and to make sure.
But what was the motivation then?
So I founded Connected Product before I joined Dealfront, and even before I joined ZoomInfo. So it was, it came out of FunnelFox, where we did a lot of work around email and calendar connectivity, and for 8 years. And so at the end of that, the work that actually Ringlead asked us to do at the time was to build a scheduler for them, like a scheduling component on top of their routing solution. And we were able to do that within 2 to 3 months. And they were anticipating to take 9 to 12 months for that. And then I realized after that, wow, we actually know something really well that other companies struggle with. Let's start a company, right? So that's how Connected Product was born. And since then, we've just kept getting assignments on this, usually through word of mouth, referral.
Nice.
There was one company, Nihilus, that we worked with a lot, and they were sending us some customers that needed help with their implementation, and that's pretty much it. Like that,
the power of niching down.
Yeah, exactly. And the nice thing about a company like that is it doesn't have to become like the next $1 billion company. Right?
Yeah.
A company like this at this lower scale is still a great business to run, and it's just nice also to have that exposure kind of to something.
Yeah,
nice. Okay, sounds good. Let's move to the next section. We have fixed questions, so it's 4 questions. So it's not rapid fire, but it's like a bit shorter answers. So I think the first one is, what's a controversial opinion that you have?
I think the one thing I keep coming back to when I'm talking with other founders, or also when I'm looking at problems that we might face within the business, it's often like having a mediocre thing is so much worse than not having anything at all. And that's like with things, with data, with people, it's always the same thing. And I think people have this false sense of security that when someone puts data in front of them, that now this is good and it's not questioned anymore. Or when you have someone in a role that this as long as that the thing or the person is there, you're kind of stuck there. And I think it's heavily underestimated how much that costs, because as soon as you then make a change, often afterwards, people are like, oh, wow. So I think this idea of like, as long as you have something in place that only does so, like the cost of this is there's statements like mediocrity is what kills companies. And I think it ties to that. But I'm surprised how often this comes back when analyzing problems.
What do I always say? It's either a fuck yes or a fuck no. Like the middle ground is always risky.
Yeah.
Nice. So what's your biggest fuck up?
That you're comfortable sharing.
Of course.
It's a hard question because I don't regret things too much. I see everything as a learning curve.
It doesn't have to be something you regret.
It doesn't have to be a regret.
It's something that learning after, you're like, okay, this was a learning moment.
We used to say biggest fail, but I think one of our big also learnings, like also from how we think about it, is that if you learn from it, you don't really look at it as failure, because as an entrepreneur, you're screwing things up all the time and learning from it. But that's why we say, like, what's the biggest screw up? What's the biggest fuck up? What's like just something that we like, that didn't work, and then bounce back.
So maybe this one. So once when I was at this startup in Vienna before I founded FunnelFox, right? There was a company we were dealing with, and it had taken me a long time before I finally got them in the pipeline. This was a big deal, like double-digit millions probably in revenue, and at some point I got impatient with the guy, and they were like, I didn't like how they were dealing with us. And I made the mistake of responding to an email when angry, and I haven't done it many times since. But that was the one where like it took me another 2 months to get them back into the into the process. We did close the deal in the end, but I had to own that one.
Yeah, I mean, if it cost you 2 months rather than double-digit millions, that's not too bad then.
That's right. Yeah. But it's still whenever. Yeah, I've never seen that end up well.
I understand. So third one is, who do you learn from the most? So obviously, this changes all the time, but I would say maybe like a figure or an author, someone that you remember that you're like, okay, I learned a lot from these people.
So this is hard for me. There's no specific person I look at. I'm not much of a content consumer, actually. Like I do, and I create stuff, and I do read through things, but as soon as something is 1,000 words, I'm like, I'm not sure I'm gonna get through that.
I'm the same.
I can barely get through an audiobook. I can so
Can also be a colleague, can be a friend, can just be people who post on LinkedIn.
I mean, if we think about colleagues, for example, I've learned a lot about a lot of the stuff around product-led growth and product-led sales. I've learned from Pekka, which is one of the founders of Leadfeeder. He's been great to work with together, and has a very pragmatic approach to how to run and grow a business.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay, good answer. And the last one is, what is your favorite tool for 2024?
Can I say Dealfront?
Of
No,
course,
I'm
you can say
kidding. I'm
Dealfront.
kidding. My favorite tool for 2024.
Think about the things you use the most at the moment.
Trying to. Yeah. That's the thing. That makes a lot of sense. But I'm just thinking through my day, like, what do I use? And like, I use Slack. I don't love it, but I use it. It's not at the top of my list.
On a side note, because I was just thinking about Slack, none of the guests until now answer Slack. Well, I think is the tool I use the most on the day. It's not perfect or whatever, but I think it does the job. But nobody mentions Slack. It's really fun.
I mean, I've spent 5 minutes in Microsoft Teams and I go running back to Slack, begging on my knees. So
It can be a tool for researching. We use a lot of Perplexity now, for instance. To research a few things.
True, actually. Good point. So recently I've been using Claude a lot. So that's been, so I started using it because I read that it's better in emulating your writing style versus ChatGPT. So
and is it?
It does a good job. Yeah, definitely. Cool. And I've gone much deeper now. I'm also trying to use it to write certain code, for example. And really going that next level of like, okay, thank you, but does it also do this? What does this mean? And really having the conversation about it and iterating on the result. This has been interesting, and it's something I'd love to do a lot more around. It's often a time question, how much, but yeah, Claude is my favorite thing right now.
Nice.
Good answer.
Cool. That brings us to the next section, which is the kudos and facepalm of the week. We like to call out one thing that we want to celebrate and one thing that we give a little bit of a we shun. No, I don't want to be that harsh. But we like to call out one thing that's great and one thing that's a bit less. Vincent, you go first. Otherwise, we risk sometimes stealing our guest's answer. So.
Sure. So, I mean, kudo this week, I think, is to Johan de Wit and the SaaS Summit. That was a great event that I attended. And just great vibe, great community there. So kudos to how that was set up.
Yes.
What do you call the other thing? Facepalm?
Facepalm.
Winter's here, and I had a cold this week. Big facepalm. Yeah.
Yep. That's
we're all gonna get it at one point.
Yeah, and we'll talk about this in a sec. But you live in Spain, right? So that is also why I do not live in the Netherlands in the winter. I live in Spain. My kudos and facepalm. Kudos goes to. We're currently in the process of hiring a new person, and we need to use kind of a employer of record service. And I just worked with one. I just kind of still exploring options because every company has like their own, let's say, quirks. But I was signing up to Deal, and and I had a bunch of questions, and I signed up to the demo, and I could book it myself. And then I sent an email to the salesperson saying, I don't want to waste your time. I have a few very specific questions. Maybe you could answer them before the call. I got an out of office back, and I thought, now I have to actually do the demo and wait for it. But then one of his colleagues obviously had picked up seen the message and called me and gave the answer. And I think that's cool. I think it's good to create a good sales experience. I think that's something sometimes quite underrated. We think a lot about the activities we need to do to close a deal, but we don't really think about the sales experience itself. Facepalm, I recently made a post about the 4 Ps of marketing. And one of my main observations that I intended was that when I look at B2B tech companies, I'm not sure you can call them of marketing anymore. I see a lot of struggle and strife between product and marketing teams. And I saw a debate somewhere in the comment section where a couple of B2B marketing leaders were claiming they should own product, including prioritization and roadmap, which seemed a little bit silly to me. So I made a post about it. Not my best post, let's be honest. It was a little bit cheeky, a little bit facetious. And I basically said, anyone who thinks the 4 Ps are still of marketing in a B2B tech company is arrogant. I usually post in like my echo chamber of B2B founders, but then a relatively well-known 200K follower marketing professor decided to comment a pretty nasty and personal comment on my post, which created a very big imbalance between my audience, which is mainly B2B founders, who all seem to agree with the point I was making, and his followers of largely FMCG, B2C marketing consultants, many of which have never done a day of marketing themselves, like the talker types rather than the doers. And I got so much abuse. It was insane. As 70,000 reach, and 99% of that reach came from this guy's audience. And yeah, that was just a facepalm because, I don't really care. I don't come from that world, and I kind of pride myself in, I don't care about the academia of marketing. I don't have a marketing degree. I don't care about any of that stuff. I really relate with what you said, Vincent, which is, I learn by doing, and I've done that very effectively for the last 15 years. But it was really funny to see all these people who work as consultants, aren't in the trenches, all making fun that I don't have a marketing degree, which is really weird because if I ever thought people would make fun of my academic credentials, it wouldn't be for having a degree in political science instead of marketing. So and if you feel the need to kind of personally attack somebody because it was a very personal response when you have that many followers, and I later found out that seems to be a trend. So that is my facepalm for the week. Although I have to admit it was not my best post. So I wish it had been a post I was really passionate about. But I do think I did have all my product management and product team friends in mind when I made that post.
All right. So for me, I think I'm going to start with a kudo. I'm going to give it an internal kudo today to Georgie. It's been helping us a lot. We organized a breakfast, for example, last week. He helped us out finding the venue, organizing everything. And he's doing a really good job bringing the Growth Syndicate to the next step. So kudos to Georgie. And facepalm is nothing as major as Ferdy. I think it's something more fun that I saw. So we do the podcast, obviously. And I think every time we put the podcast out there, I get an automatic email about someone telling me, I can help you to improve your SEO or your podcast. But it's all generic emails, And that this person that came out who is actually making a screenshot, doing actually some SEO research on YouTube, telling me what I can improve. They're like, good, she did a little bit of job. But then the first sentence, I don't remember what it was, but at one point she mentioned so full sentence that it was insert channel, between brackets. So she forgot to actually fix that up. So I thought it was pretty fun that she came up for the full thing research, but then the message was automatic and then she screwed up in that moment. I thought it was a pretty fun thing. All right, should we go then to the rapid fire? All right, let's do the rapid fire. So you ready?
Let's do it.
Okay, so it's a one-word answer or a really short answer or. Okay?
Okay.
So sales leader owning product or product leaders owning sales? Sales leaders owning product or product leaders owning sales? The $1 million question.
Is there a third option?
You can pick a third option if you want.
No third option. He has to choose one if he had to choose.
So a commercial person owning product or more of a product type owning sales?
Product owning sales, just because I'm in product.
Okay. PLG or PLS?
PLS.
Running SaaS or service company?
Sorry, what was
it? Would you rather run a SaaS or a service company?
SaaS. Although both are good.
Okay. One thing that makes a SaaS product remarkable?
Intuitive experience.
In one word, what is the most important attribute for an entrepreneur?
Resilience.
Good. It's a really tough one. Barcelona or Amsterdam?
Barcelona.
And remote or hybrid working?
Remote.
Remote. All right. Perfect. Then you can't talk anymore, so I'm going to have to close the podcast. So, Vincent, thank you very much for your time. We really appreciate it. And we're looking forward to publish this one.
Yeah, thanks, guys. This was fun.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Vincent.